Hello, so I'm back in Elite Dangerous again, as you can see, and this time I'm just running the game at 120 Hz in my Quest 2, just to take a look at the effect of it really. I am locking frame rate in the Oculus debug tool down to 60 frames per second, so we're running in constant reprojection. And I thought I'd just give this a try just to see how it runs, honestly, because the thing that sparked this is really the recent PS VR2 footage of GT7. Now, in the RGN video about GT7, they did say, Ryan McCaffrey did say that he was told that it was running at 120 frames per second per eye in the PS VR2, and I just hope this is really true. The reason I'm saying this is because in the original PSVR, the frame rate, it could run at 90 Hz and at 120 Hz. Now that gave options. It meant that you could run at 90 frames per second native in the original PSVR, or you could run at 120 frames per second native, or, which is pretty much what almost every single title did, it ran at 60 frames per second, but that was then reprojected using their sort of interpolation kind of thing they had, like ASW, like the Steam VR motion smoothing, similar technology. What they did is they took that 60 FPS and then reprojected it up to those 120 Hz. And when Ryan McCaffrey says he was told it was running at 120 frames per second, GT7, which is not a, it's quite a graphically intensive game. I think even Digital Foundry have said on some of their analysis of that, even on flat, it sometimes drops frames at 60 FPS. So getting that running in VR on its own, is quite a big deal. But to then get it running at 120 FPS is a big win. If they can do it, it would be a big win, and I'm just not too sure that's what is actually happening. Again, I hope it is, and I'm looking forward to trying it. I think things are a little bit up in the air at the moment, but I think I'm hoping to try a PSVR2 when it gets launched. I'm not picking one up at launch, but I'm probably going to be able to try one, and I'll report back on that once things are firmed up and stuff like that. But I'm looking forward to trying the PSVR2. But the thing is, if it's running at 120 Hz and then using the old trick that the original PSVR used, which is 60 FPS and then reprojecting it up to those 120 Hz, is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, honestly, running this now, it's so smooth. Like, rotational head movement is, there's no difference really from running native 120 frames to this reprojected, this constant 60 frames per second reprojected up to 120 Hz. But there are differences. So for example, if I move my head from side to side, there's a slight difference in how the in-game footage looks. Honestly, I'm actually surprised by how great it looks anyway. So there's been improvements. This is using asynchronous space warp, which is the Oculus equivalent of whatever Sony used with the PSVR. I'm not really getting too many artifacts on this from this reprojection, so they've obviously made some pretty good improvements. But you can see I've got the performance overlay in front of me. I am running it at a locked 60 FPS, and then it's upping that to the 120. So even if that is the case, to get it looking as good as it does on the PSVR2, and that footage that they are showing looks fantastic on the PSVR2, I suspect, and before I saw that video, I saw a tweet from Mike Virtual Reality Oasis saying that it had been confirmed that it was running at 120 FPS through that RGM video, and it does seem that it is confirmed. I don't know if it's actually rock solid confirmed, and I'm not sure Mike would say that's rock solid either, to be honest. But it was confirmed in that video by Ryan McCaffrey. But even if it's not, this is not a bad experience, and I think racers are just, they cope with the reprojection artifacts and things like that really well anyway, so it's not necessarily at the end of the world. I know that there are some titles with the PSVR2 that do run in reprojection. I think that's been confirmed, or people that have tried it have mentioned that it looks like it is running in reprojection. Things like Horizon Call of the Mountain. And again, this is pretty much expected, I would say. Developers are more likely to push for graphical fidelity and then utilize the reprojection that the PSVR2 has in order to make, just promotional videos and screenshots and things like that look better, while also leaning on that technology to still make the game perform relatively smooth. And actually, I've got to say, like, running this constant 60 FPS now in Elite Dangerous, it's a great experience. I would always take native frame rates where possible, but I can't deny that this is a great experience, so I'm not too worried about the PSVR2. I'm not picking one up at launch or anything like that, but even if most titles run in the same way using reprojection, it's a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, it worked okay with the original PSVR, so I don't think there'll be too many problems with the PSVR2. And if they can push native frame rates... See, the other thing I just wanted to quickly get into actually is, if it was native 120 FPS, it seems to me an odd decision, because they've got the option for 90 FPS native. If they could even get to 90 FPS native and then, increase graphical fidelity or resolution scaling and things like that, I just believe that the developers would have taken that option. 90 FPS native is good enough. They don't need to push for that 120 and sacrifice any graphical fidelity, because they must have had some kind of sacrifice to get to that 120. Even if they're utilizing the eye tracked based foveated rendering, it still seems to me like they've got to have made some graphical sacrifices, especially when you consider the Digital Foundry video of the original the flat game of GT7 dropping frames. So all of this is a roundabout way of saying that I don't believe that it is native 120 FPS. And before I got strayed off my point a little bit earlier actually, but before I saw that video, I mentioned this to Rog, my co-host on Recented, and he was saying he was doubtful. He'd seen the video, and based on what he saw of that, he was doubtful that it would be 120 native. And once I'd seen that video, I agreed. I don't think Ryan McCaffrey was given all the details there, and it's easy for Sony and the developers of GT7 say it's 120 frames per second, but is that really sort of reprojected frames? So yeah, that's the tough thing. So I've just completely messed that up. I don't know what I was trying to do. I completely I sort of zoned out then. I wasn't concentrating on what I was doing. So I'm gonna get away from this. I've messed up here completely. I was thinking of landing on that planet, but it doesn't look like I can actually land on it anyway, so yeah, apologies for that. Completely zoned out there. But
Frameshift drive charging.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, just the purpose of this video and like my trial with it really is more or less how good is like 60 to 120 now, and it's pretty good. Again, the usual reprojection artifacts, what I would usually get, and I am getting a little bit there, but that's only because it's stuttering slightly anyway, it's struggling, you can see on the performance overlay, but now it's relatively smooth. See, rotational head movement is asynchronous time warp. This has been something that's been implemented since the original Rift, and the Vive had similar technology on Steam VR as well. So rotational head movement is always had this safety net of performance where it looks perfect. I mean, rotational head movement, you never get any stuttering with that when running in constant reprojection. The part where it's always struggled slightly, and this is with ASW, asynchronous space warp, what that did is that was positional movement. So if you actually move in space, you will get artifacts then. I'm getting very few artifacts now, and they have improved it. There was ASW 2.0, and presumably, hopefully they're still working on it. I don't know, because, you know, Meta are not really that interested in PC quite so much anymore. But I've got to say, to me, this is a great implementation, and there's not too many artifacts when I'm just using this positional movement. So yeah, I mean, I'm in two minds about this. I'm thinking, you know, another option could be 90 hertz and then running at 45 FPS. But the problem with that is you will notice the artifacts a little bit more. The higher the refresh rate, the more they can be disguised. But anyway, once again, I'm rambling on. I'm getting off topic. I don't even know what the topic was. What was the topic? 60 up to 120 and the PS VR2. That was the sort of general topic. I think I've covered most of it. But don't forget to check out the Recentered podcast, which we'll be recording next week, where I'm sure this topic will come up and we'll be talking about it a little bit more. So that's pretty much it from me. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. So I'm just cutting in quickly at the end of this video because as I was editing it, I got a message on Discord from Rog, once again my co-host from Recentered, and he sent me a link to this article regarding GT7 from the creator of Gran Turismo 7. And in this article, I'll just go down a little bit, it does seem to confirm that it is running in reprojection. So this is the interesting part. So he makes reference to the original PSVR initially, but then he says this time the resolution of the head-mounted display panel and the power of the PS5 have improved the drawing ability, and it has become possible to solve it. In addition to being able to output 60 FPS at normal times, panning and tilting can also be rendered at 120 FPS with reprojection, greatly improving image quality, which is sort of some of the stuff that I was referring to in the video actually, with the rotational head movement and things like that. So it does look like this more or less confirms that it is running in reprojection, but there's still, you know, maybe it's not 100%, I don't know, but that does seem to imply it at least. So I just wanted to add this in at the end of the video. And again, I don't think it's a big deal. I just think it's it does point to the fact that PSVR2, most titles probably will be running in that reprojection state in the same way that the original PSVR was. So if you weren't bothered on the original PSVR, you probably won't be bothered on the PSVR2 either. And really, I think it's, you know, it's to be expected at the end of the day. So yeah, I just wanted to add this extra bit of information in the video, and I'll put a link to the article in the description as well. But that's it for me. Thanks again. I'll see you later.